Hello and welcome to the Indiana State Police Roadshow. I'm your host, Sergeant John Perrine, the Public Information Officer for the Indiana State Police Indianapolis District. The Roadshow is brought to you by the Indiana State Police Alliance and Cops for Kids, a subsidiary of the State Police Alliance. For more information about our sponsor, visit www.indianasfinest.com. We want to thank Network Indiana and Eddie Griffith for helping get us on the radio across the state of Indiana. We certainly appreciate them. And so if you're in your car, cruising down the road, driving the speed limit with your seatbelt on, using your turn signal, both hands on the wheel, no phone in your hand, we appreciate you. And if you're watching us on YouTube, that's thanks to Tom Trial. You guys all know the incredible work he does. And if you're watching us, it's because he works so hard to get us on YouTube. Check out the Indiana State Police YouTube channel by searching Indiana State Police on YouTube. Our guest today, all the way from east of Indianapolis in Hancock County, is a longtime friend of mine and a PIO that I look up to, and that's Greg Duda from the Hancock County 911 Center. So, Greg, thanks.
Yeah, appreciate it.
And so what a cool opportunity for us here to talk about dispatch centers, because they're kind of, I always say dispatchers are the first responders, and that is, you're the connection. You're making the connection between somebody who needs help and somebody who can give that help. And there's no more important role in our lives as first responders than that, because if you don't answer the phone, the help never comes. And so we're certainly appreciative for that.
Well, thank you. Yep. And that's exactly, we're real appreciative that Indiana has now recognized 911 dispatchers as first responders, which was huge because, exactly like you said, we were the first part of that link to getting people help.
Yeah, and both directions, right? When somebody calls 911, they need help. But oftentimes, too, when a first responder picks up the radio, they need help. And again, that common hub is that dispatcher sitting behind that console. And so, very valuable, and we value you, and we value our dispatchers for sure.
Yep, absolutely.
And so, what are some things that folks should be thinking about? So, if I always tell this, if you've ever called 911, you probably felt your hands shaking, even if it wasn't anything major. You just get this nervous feeling about you. And so, what are some things that people need to think about, or that you deal with every day?
Probably the most important thing that we want to tell everybody is 911 dispatchers and dispatchers in general, along with realtors, it's all location, location, location. If we don't know where you are and you don't know where you are, it's hard for us to get you help. And so that's the first link. And so we have a lot of cool technologies that are out there now, like Rapid SOS and Smart 911, where it can give us some really good locationing. But a lot of people just don't know common sense things, it seems like, anymore, which, am I going east? Am I facing north? What road am I on? And so that makes it really difficult. But luckily, we have these cool technologies where it can pinpoint you within like a couple of meters. Yeah.
And, again, sometimes people are like, well, I don't know what road I'm on, but here's the billboard I can see, or I can see this building or this sign. That'll give you something close.
Right. And that's where a lot of the importance of a dispatcher knowing their area. So when someone says, I'm at the speedway that's by 70. So now I can already know which one that is, So when you're able to give us at least locations like that, because we don't expect everyone to know an actual physical address, especially if you're traveling, visiting, that's fine. And so it's all about that location and then telling us exactly what it is you need.
And so, years ago with landlines, the address would pop up when somebody calls. But with cell phones, that's not the case. Sometimes the people probably think the technology's there, that as soon as they call, you're looking at them on a map. And that's just not the case. Sometimes that is a wider area if we're trying to find them.
Correct. And so I'd say probably about right now for our center, I'd say at least a good 95% of our calls are all going to be wireless, which I haven't been in it this long, but I remember a time where every call was a landline call. And so now it's totally flipped. So now everyone is mobile, which has put a huge strain on like the whole system as a whole. Cell phone companies having to make sure that they have enough towers to handle all that traffic, and just how that locationing works. So sometimes we will get something called phase 1, which is just the tower location, which is not our favorite. We know you're close to that area, but we don't know exactly where. Phase 2 is a more accurate location where it triangulates you between 3 different towers. But when we have cool technology like Rapid SOS, that can get us within like 4 or 5 meters.
That's really cool.
And it plots you on a map, and we can see where you're traveling and which directions you're turning.
Yeah, because I remember throughout my career, I've responded to calls where the dispatcher will say, hey, we don't have a location. They're within 2,500 feet of this tower. Well, if you think about that, 2,500 feet as a radius
huge.
around a tire is around a tower is a long way to search.
Absolutely.
And so now,
especially if it's very densely residential.
Yeah.
I mean, you could have no clue.
The closer we get, but that's why it's so important that when you're driving, especially, pay attention to the road signs, the mile markers, the landmarks, because you never know. Nobody ever expects to be in a situation to have to call 911.
No, and I think I'll probably get it wrong, but the last statistic was the average person will call 911 about 2, maybe 3 times in their lifetime.
Yeah.
So it's not something that we do a lot of. And so, like you said, there is that kind of excitement and that whole nervousness that when they do call, especially if it is a medical emergency or something that's really life-threatening, it's very confusing for people to get their wits about them and then to get that information to us.
And you know what's interesting is sometimes people say, well, I don't know if I should call 911 or if I should call the non-emergency number. What constitutes an emergency? So what advice do you have for people? Because I'm sure you get calls daily of that should not have been a 911 call.
Absolutely. I mean, we would love to have statistics about that, but I mean, a lot of people call. It's unfortunately for some people, it's become the catch-all. So it's instead of dialing, 411 or whatever, they would be calling us, be like, hey, I saw this goose that was running across the road and I mean, he's probably going to get hit. And you're like, this isn't 911,
right. Or what's the road condition? What's the weather?
That would be another one is, or people want, what you wanted to also talk about here is some myths that are a real prevalent one that shows up every so often is there's a concept that people believe 911 is like a national call center. And so we'll get calls from people that say, we go Hancock County 911, what's the location of your emergency? And they'll be like, Orlando, Florida. And we're like, okay, like you'll need to call Orlando. Like we can't transfer you.
Right.
And they're like, you can't? And we're like, no, this is Indiana. Like
right.
I can dispatch and do everything within Hancock County, but that's a whole nother thing. And they're like, well, it says to call 911 if there's an emergency. We're like, yes, but here. Like, right. So it's kind of a confusing concept for people. So we do our best while we're on the phone with them to look up the Orlando number and then give that to them or text it to them.
Yeah. Talk to me about the difficult moments. And I can't imagine what it's like to sit behind that console where you get this person calling for help and you know that they need help. And then those moments that the help's coming, but you're just sitting there just waiting. Does that seem like forever? Does that seem like it's taking forever to happen?
Absolutely. Because especially on like real emotionally charged ones where we're guiding them through CPR instructions, or if it's an overdose, where time is critical, strokes even to a point where, that whole getting responders to them, you can feel your internal clock ticking and the callers is going way faster than ours because they're like, well, why are they not here yet? And so I have a personal habit of anytime someone says, why are they not, what's taking them so long is I'll look over at my screen that says how long we've been connected. And it'll be like 2-3 minutes.
Right.
And you're like, it's only been a few moments.
Like
it felt forever for them because of that, like that emotional situation, but it's really not that long. And the way that, most pretty much everywhere in the state of Indiana set up that you're really not too far from any first responders at any given moment, whether it be a volunteer department or paid full-time departments like the fire service, medical, or a police officer, at least to help get there and help triage that situation.
And I experienced it firsthand last summer was I was off duty in my personal vehicle with my family, and we came upon a serious crash, and person was unresponsive, so I started CPR, and we were in a rural area. And I know that it was probably 5 or 6 minutes, but it had to feel like a half hour that I was doing CPR until the first responder started getting there.
Absolutely.
And that's got to be difficult for those folks on that other end of the call. It's got to be difficult for the dispatchers because all you want is that help to get there.
Right, and that's what we're counting on. So we're wanting that help to get there, and we're wanting to do our best part, which is helping you through CPR instructions. If there is an overdose, giving you Narcan instructions. Allergic reactions is another one. So if they have EpiPens, how to give them instructions for that type of thing.
And I think, obviously there's so much content on the internet, but oftentimes we see these stories about victims of a violent crime that have called 911 and had to use some sort of code. Have you ever experienced that? We don't have to go into the details, but have you experienced, and what is a way that people can make sure that it's not a prank?
And I've actually taken, I think, at least 2 where at the time it didn't seem like a code, but that's actually what they were doing. And so that's the thing is there is that one that's real popular online that talks about ordering a pizza.
Yeah.
And I guess probably what has happened over the time is because so many people call 911 for the wrong reason,
Yeah.
that it doesn't phase us anymore. It's like, so people are calling all the time wanting
With
really
non-emergencies.
outlandish,
Right.
obscure non-emergency things. So when someone calls and says that they need to, what's the number to Pizza Hut? We're like, I can text it to you. We'll help you out, but we're just like, do you have an emergency? And they'll be like, no. And we're like, okay. And so like something seems off. And that's usually where we pick it up, is when the person's acting a little strange. And so there is no training. There's no universal code for like, oh, I need help at this place, because I would say if you're in that situation where you feel you need to get help, the best thing you can do is text 911.
Yeah.
All 92 counties in Indiana receive text to 911, and they'll get processed the exact same way that you can with a voice call. And the benefit we get to that one is, even if you just say help, we still have a good idea of your location, because of the way the phone works and the way it's sending out that information. So you won't even have to say anything other than help, and we're going to be sending people.
Yeah. And I think we live in a world where oftentimes people prefer to text instead of actually talk.
Right.
But I think it's important to know that texting is secondary. It's not the most efficient way to communicate with a 911 operator because of that delay. I mean, there's an obvious message to message delay.
Correct. And so they say voice is best, text when you can. And so we encourage people to, especially during snow emergencies or weather events, if you can text 911 about a problem, whether it be a flooded roadway or a tree down, we prefer to get those, because we can handle more text messages per dispatcher than we can calls. Because when one dispatcher's on a call, they're absorbed into that call. Yeah. Whereas we can keep 3 or 4 different texts going.
Yeah. And so I'll tell you, if you ever want to see the Webster definition of multitasking, go into a dispatch center, because it is absolutely incredible what you're able to do sitting behind that console and do 3 things at the same time without missing a beat on any of them.
Actually happened the other day. One of my other dispatchers, we have wireless headsets, and her battery had died, so I picked up her channel real quick. Well, that was at the exact time that there was a crash where they were asking for a record. The fire department was marking on scene, and I was already on the phone with the jail checking a warrant. So that literally is the definition of the things that we do, where it's just all kind of happening simultaneously, and just keeping your wits about you, make sure that you get the help where it needs to go.
Yeah, and that's incredible. And so what do you want folks to know about the incredible work you do every day? I mean, what is it that draws folks to be these dispatchers and sit in these situations and be that answer for the call for help?
Well, what we've noticed personally at our center is that there will be a lot of people that say, oh, there's no way I could ever do that. I don't see how I could ever do that. And they come in, they visit, they'll like watch us a couple times. They will come in and do not like an internship, but they'll sit with us, and then they'll apply, and they'll sit down and be like, wow, I can do this. And that's the thing, is a lot of people can do it. They think they can't, but once you see what the job is, how it works, the people you deal with, the officers, the camaraderie that we all have, like, it really is a rewarding job for everybody, because, an officer will say, oh, I was at this overdose and we did CPR and we saved this guy. Yeah. Well, how many, potentially overdoses did that dispatcher take that day? 3, 4, something like CPR. You did that. So like the number is greater almost in a sense, because we're that first touch and then we pass it off. We get that and we get it off. So it's like we're getting all of these different floods of different calls. So you're impacting a lot more people than you actually do until you realize it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And so again, people call 911 for non-emergent situations often. And so it's why it's really important for people to say, now, oftentimes I get asked, well, what is an emergency? And I'll tell people, if it's 20 below zero and you're stranded on the side of the road, it's okay to call 911, because we can offer help for that.
Yes.
If you're in the middle of the night lost, that's not the time to call 911.
No. Right? Probably the ones that we get the most of, it seems like a dog running loose.
Dogs. Yeah.
You're like, that's not an emergency situation. Why is my power out? Yeah. A flooded basement. You're like, these are all calls that do not need to be processed through a 911 center. So, we need to be focusing on like true medical emergencies.
Yeah. If you need immediate help, that's when you call 911. Now, cell phones are valuable, and the technology continues to get better and better, but knowing your location, again, is going to be the key. Absolutely. We're in that location. And then depending what center you call and what you do, our center uses EMD and EFD, which is emergency medical dispatch and emergency fire dispatch, which is we ask you questions that are from a computer prompt that help triage what exactly type of help you need based on what you're telling us. There are other counties like Hamilton County that uses EPD, which is police dispatch. So any police
type call, they'll ask you questions to kind of also, once again, triage to what you need.
Very good. Well, I want to thank my guest today for coming in, Greg Duda from the Hancock County 911 Center. A great resource for me. I speak to him often and certainly appreciate your efforts out there. So, Greg, thanks for coming in today.
Absolutely. Appreciate it.